Hello and welcome to another episode of Fergo and the Freak. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRLP. And joining me is League Freak, who you can find on Twitter at League Freak, who has just survived from a horrible case of man flu. How are you today?
I'm very good. I'm happy to be alive because, I was pretty sick over the weekend. So, yeah, first day I could do a podcast and look at us, we're tearing through on.
I was so concerned, I already lined up about 15 people to replace you.
Oh, shit. Well,
not true.
As long as they can slap their lips together, there you go.
That's true. So today we've got, we're going to look at our own clubs and how they're performing this year. So obviously we'll start with the one that's just had their match, and that was the West Tigers, and in what was I won't say possibly, it was the most pitiful performance that's happened so far this year. What are your thoughts on it, mate?
Well, first of all, that Parramatta Stadium, god damn it, is beautiful. What a monument to rugby league, to the game. It's kind of weird seeing the game being played in a stadium that's just so perfect like that. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me. The second thing was I felt like there was a bit of an ambush element in it. I think that Parramatta were obviously keyed up for it, and I know the Tigers would have been too, but there was a lot more at stake for Parramatta. I mean, if Parramatta had lost their first home game, especially to the Tigers, who had said that, to remember that it's not just Parramatta Stadium, it's one of the Tigers' 15 different stadiums.
Yes.
It would have been very embarrassing. So I thought there was an element of that there. Then losing Robbie Farah obviously hurts their attack. And I just think that a lot of things snowballed, but they were alarmingly bad up the middle of the field in defence. There were so many line breaks up the middle that just shouldn't have been happening in a first-grade team. It was kind of like watching a first-grade team take on a second-grade team. There was just too much happening up the middle of the field and a lot of runaway tries and, yeah, just one of those terrible days for a club.
Yeah, like you, I think that ground looks absolutely stunning. It's also the thing that's going to be good about it too is unlike pretty much every other venue there, other than some of the park grounds when teams are in form there, it's going to be imposing for opposition teams to go to because you just got all those home fans right on top of you. And all that noise just stays in there,
Yeah, I think it'll be a lure for players as well. I think playing in that stadium, because I was watching it and I was thinking, this might be the first time we've had a venue in rugby league where a player is lured by the venue. And you've got other sports where it's like that a little bit. I know Madison Square Garden in the NBA is like that. This stadium, they're on top of you and, even if you get 20,000 people there, it's going to feel very intimidating, as you say. And I think that it's going to lure players to Parramatta in a weird way.
Yeah, I think if the Eels can get their shit together on the field and start playing some good, consistent footy based on what they've done today, and the fans get behind them like they did today, they could very well start being a genuine, finals contender every year.
Yeah.
That ground with the way it's designed there, those fans will give them an extra leg, no doubt about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think now that people have seen it for the first time, I mean, it made me want to get to a game there. There's a few games coming up. I was even thinking about going and seeing St George versus Parramatta, which St George might be my favourite team to watch at the moment, but we might talk about that in another podcast. But for this game, I think that the atmosphere and looking at the crowd, I mean, I think it was at least 90% Eels fans by the look of it. I think the crowd definitely got to the Tigers. I think the occasion did. And I think that it boosted Parramatta because they were playing like they were 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
Well, I was going to say it looked like 17 lucky fans got to go down and be on the field while Parramatta went on a training run. This is the scary thing about the Tigers, okay? And I was saying this at the start of the year, is that Jacob Little is the hooker who's meant to be replacing Robbie Farah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's our backup plan when Farah retires. And we saw tonight that the Tigers are a shambles when Farah's not on the field, not just in attack, but in defence as well. He just holds that middle together so well. And when he was gone, all those points happened. And it's not just his defence he does in the middle, but he keeps the line set in the proper structure it needs to be in. That's what he provides in the defensive line as well. And yeah, when he was gone, there was just holes in that defensive line everywhere, and they were making very feeble attempts at tackles. And I thought a rev up at halftime would have fixed that, but there was just no commitment after the break either. It just kept coming, and Parramatta weren't executing the most complicated, exquisite plays ever to score points.
No,
they were doing it very easily and very often through plays up the middle. So, unlike normal losses where your team may lose by 8 or 10 or sometimes 20 points, there's usually a fair bit to look on, which is something you can work on for the next week. The Tigers look like they need to do a complete reset because you can't build anything off what they did against Parramatta.
No.
That was just woeful.
You just got to forget it. It's just one of those performances that, if you didn't even look at the film, I wouldn't blame the Tigers for that. There was no redeeming qualities in their game today. And as you say, as soon as Farah went off, it was like, and he went off at a really bad time too. Like they were under the pump, and he went off. And I mean, you put up a stat about the first 14, how much points were scored in the first. Tell us that one because that was amazing.
It was the first 14 minutes, and the last 14 minutes of the game, Parramatta scored 1 point to 0. But in the 52 minutes in the middle, Parramatta scored 50 points to 6.
Wow. Unbelievable.
And the last 14 minutes wasn't because the West Tigers defence got better. It was just Parramatta went, what's the point of trying any further? We've already racked up 50, hence, the field goal that Mitch Moses kicked at the end there. He's just piss farting around really in the end. And that's how they were approaching the last 15 minutes of the game.
Yeah, and like they had a couple of things. There were a couple of times, I know there was a break that Jennings made, and they were just getting caught where they weren't getting caught in that middle part of the game. They were just going straight through the line, and it was open space. It was 2-on-1 with the, one player in the backfield. And it just, it was crazy to see how bad they were up the middle, though. And they just need to forget that game. I don't think. I mean, they've been playing with a lot of effort this year. That's one thing I've noticed. I think Maguire's got them playing with a bit more starch than they had last year, which was good to see. But tonight, it was just a write-off, and it looked like at one stage they could have had 60 put on them. And like even in towards the end of that first half, it was nearly a point a minute. So, it could have been way worse than it was. So you got to give the Tigers a, tiny little bit of credit there. But I wonder how much they're looking forward to having Benji Marshall back, because they'd been going all right without him. And, you don't want to break up a team that's winning games. And I wonder if this will allow them to have a bit of an excuse to bring Benji Marshall back in the next couple of weeks, because I believe he's pretty close to coming back. So that'll be interesting to see what they do with him, because I think it might have been an awkward situation had they either not been losing games this poorly, or if they'd just been going all right like they had the last few weeks. I think that would have been an issue that would have maybe caused some problems at the Tigers, and we've seen that happen before. But after a loss like this, I mean, the coach is within his rights to do whatever he decides to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah, look, I think Benji coming back would help a little bit, but what we saw today, I think, was the start of the Tigers' lack of depth in the forwards, because the forwards are just looking tired, and without Farah on there helping to keep them in shape, they were just doing so much work, and they were buggered by half time, and there was nothing was going to fix that.
Yeah,
so they did reasonably well to keep them to keep Parrot at 20 points in the second half, but to be honest, it was a lost cause by then.
Yeah, and the other
And
thing to remember too is in the first tackle, Parramatta lost a player, and then they lost a few others during the match as well. So it wasn't like they were taking on a forward pack that was untouched, which can sometimes lead to a rampage like this. They were taking on a team that was kind of making the best of a bad situation themselves. They just didn't handle it well at all. It was tough to watch if you were a West Tigers supporter.
well, to be honest, for a lot of us Tigers supporters, we've seen a lot of performances like that. So it's kind of a bit. It's not as hard to watch. The thing that makes this one difficult is the start of the season has been pretty good, and the fight back last week was that sort of gave you the hope that okay, this team is not one that quits. And then after 14 minutes today, they pretty much quit, and you think, why did that happen? Like they got revved up a few weeks ago about clocking off early, and they did it an even worse way in this game. There's just too many issues to look at. A lot of people are going to pick at Luke Brooks, but as the old saying goes, and as everyone knows, if you're a halfback, you're not going to have a good game if your forwards are completely smashed.
Yeah,
and you're on a hiding to nothing, and there wasn't much he could do. So I can't blame the backs too much. It's the forwards are just getting smashed, and there was not enough quality depth to replace them because they've been using pretty much the same forward pack for every game so far, whereas every other team has changed one or two players on the bench every week to try and keep the odd player here and there fresh.
Yeah, and putting starters on the bench, like guys that would normally start every game for a team being started off the bench for a lot of clubs. It's an interesting trend that we've seen this year.
That's right, and the Tigers just haven't been doing that. They've just been rolling out the same lineup with the same players doing the same workload, and it sounds weird to say, but they're getting a bit tired already, and it's only 6-7 games in.
Yeah,
without the depth they need to help combat that, things could probably get worse before it gets better, and that's the scary bit.
Yeah, if a few more injuries in the forward pack and they'd be in trouble, especially in the current era. I mean, I think we're in the absolute golden era of forwards in the NRL. I think that, there are guys on the bench these days that would be stars even 15 years ago. And every pack is absolutely massive. And then you've got, some physical freak outliers in the game that are massive and have footwork and speed and everything, and so when your forward pack is very, if it's held together with not too much that can go wrong with it, when things do start to go wrong, you're going to be in trouble in the NRL because even the very worst teams have very good forward packs. So, I don't know that the Tigers can really do too much about that this year, but it's definitely something that they've got to fix going forward.
Yeah. Making meters has been something that's always been a bit of an issue for the club too, especially up front, because for a long time they had, those small back rowers and whatnot, and they were more designed to try and set up second phase play. But they've got a much bigger, more mobile pack now. But I'm just looking at the stats for today, and they just got hammered in the meters. Tigers ran for 1,207 meters, Parramatta 2,041.
It's unbelievable.
It's just horrible.
Yeah, and it's and as I was saying, that was against a Parramatta pack that they lost a couple of players. They lost one guy straight away, went straight to the bench, didn't see him again because of a head knock. Lost another one later on in the match, and that wasn't even that much later into the match. So yeah, hopefully they've got some youngsters they can bring in. I mean, you'd think that they would, but the
club though is the problem with the Tigers is when they had that horrible period through Jason Taylor. Not only did they ignore a fair bit of youth at the time, but they spent a lot of money and since then, obviously, spent a lot of money trying to build a decent first grade side again. And to their credit, they've done a reasonably good job compared to what they used to have. But it's come at a cost, and that is there's not a huge amount of depth where it matters, and that's in the halves. pretty much anywhere in the spine, to be honest, and in the front row. They've got enough for the first grade side, but there's not much beyond that, and that's something they need to start looking at big time.
Yeah, definitely. Because a couple of injuries and they're stuffed.
Yeah, very much so.
There's something about Parramatta that I wanted to talk about, and that was after the game. It was interesting seeing first of all, everyone celebrated like they'd won a grand final, which was pretty funny. Like they were doing laps of honour and all sorts of stuff. I loved it. And it was weird to see a lot of media types were saying, oh, they need to re-sign all of these players. And it's like, calm down, all right? This Parramatta team has been all right this season. They haven't been terrible like they were last year. And it's weird to see this push from the media for them to just re-sign everyone. Like, there's nothing about this club that I look at and think, yeah, they can't improve on what they've got. They've got a solid base there with some solid players, but, you know, a lot of these players, solid is their ceiling, I believe. And one of the players that has been in the media a lot over the last few weeks is Clint Gutherson, who, for some reason, is holding Parramatta over a barrel and being like, I want this much money, and if you don't give it to me, I'll go elsewhere. And I just don't think he's that good of a player. I know he played all right tonight, but I think that there's a lot of better fullbacks in the game. And if I was Parramatta, I would just let him go. Like, I would let him walk. I wouldn't be paying him anything more than an average first grader's wage. I wouldn't be paying him like he was a star at all. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't mind Gutherson. I think the issue that Parramatta's got is I don't think he's a fullback at all. I think he's a 5'8". But we saw last year that Moses doesn't perform too well if he's got a 5'8" who is a stronger, player as he is there, or as far as when it comes to calling for the ball. And so I think they've put Gutherson at fullback to try and give Moses that freedom in the halves that he needs to make him perform well. I think that's what they're doing there, because I don't think he's even the best fullback at Parramatta. I think you've got one or two other options that they could go to there instead of him, who would probably be better for the job. But this mix works for better cohesion, I guess.
It's kind of because they tried French at fullback and it wasn't quite clicking. And Gutherson's gone back there, and it's sort of like a make-do measure that's working all right for now. I just don't understand this push, and I know he's a nice bloke. He's good with the fans. A lot of people say he's a really good clubman. That's all fantastic. But I just think that when you look around at the fullbacks that are in rugby league, just the ones that are starting at fullback at other NRL clubs, there's so much talent at fullback. And I don't think that you should be committing, apart from the fact that there's so many good fullbacks, you don't need to, pay overs for anybody, unless you've got like a very rare talent. I just think that he's probably not the player that I would be looking to pay anything more than an average first grader salary for, or like a winger's salary for, because, he does some good things, but I think that there are better options out there, and I think that the club should look at those options.
Yeah, I think. It's a fair point. I think Parramatta's probably going to see if Moses gets any attention elsewhere, because I think if he does and he leaves the club, I reckon they'll keep Gutherson and put him in at 5'8".
Yeah,
I just think that's more of his natural position. Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you. Would you want Moses, if Moses was going to the West Tigers, say they lose Benji and Reynolds, and I think Reynolds would be under contract still, but just say they both of them decide to retire at the end of the year, would you want Moses to be the man at the Tigers? And he'd be alongside Brooks, but would you want him to be your star signing?
No, and the reason why isn't so much to do with the way he plays, but the way he dominates in the halves with the calls. And this is the problem that Brooks had. We've seen that since Moses left the Tigers, Brooks has come more out of his shell and he's been a more dominant player. And he's he was second in the Dally M rankings last year. I'm not too sure if that was deserved, but
at least showed he was better consistently.
Yeah, it showed he was much more consistent, and he was starting to take control of the side, and that was a good thing. And I think if he was to come back, that's the problem. Is Brooks has to be the dominant half, and he's not quite there yet. But he was nowhere near it when Moses was there, because Moses was being the dominant one despite being second receiver, which is why we had that bit of conflict there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have him back there. I think he needs to be in a club where they've only got one dominant half. Oh, sorry, they don't have any dominant halves and they need one. And I think probably a good club for him would be someone like Brisbane, because they've just got 2 5'8s essentially.
Yeah,
they definitely need a dominant 7 there who's going to call plays and sort of lead things around. And I think in their system, he'd probably do a lot better.
Yeah, see, he's the sort of player. He's been very rocks and diamonds throughout his career. There's been times where, tonight I think he played the best game of his career so far by quite some way. But then there's other games where he's played in his career, and it hasn't been a long career, but there has been other games where you'll wonder what the hell he's doing or what he's thinking. He'll make silly brain explosion plays. Being that one dominant player obviously helps him a lot more. But I wouldn't want my club to be investing in him too much. I feel like he'd be the sort of player that you could get a good season out of, and then the next few seasons on his contract, you're like, oh man, we need something more than this dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the best way to have Moses, based on what I've seen him do so far, is only ever sign him on 1-year deals. Whenever he's playing for a contract, the bloke is he comes out with just absolute superstar plays, but when he's in the first year of like a 3 or 4 year loan, he's just you'll just cruise through for the first few seasons. And if we're having a good game, I'll pull my finger in a little bit. The one thing I am fully opposed to is this talk that's starting up about him being in the frame for New South Wales. And it comes about because Maloney and Cleary are just in woeful form pretty much. Maloney hasn't been too bad, but Cleary's sort of gone missing a bit. And so
a bit lost,
this talk of Moses being, a potential dark horse to play for New South Wales, that worries me, because I see him as being Mick Ennis-like, or Mitchell Pearce-like for that matter. Very, can be very good at club level, but that next step up is too big a step.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't have him anywhere near New South Wales. I would be happier to go in with the Panthers halves, and knowing that they're out of form, than want Moses in there, to be honest with you. Because it's just the rocks and diamonds thing for me. It's something that worries me about him so much. And look, he could change that. He might just mature as a player, and it might all turn around. But and he has games like he had tonight. But then there's other performances that you see him, and you're like, man, I wish he wouldn't play like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and those games are usually only a few weeks apart.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. So, speaking of the Panthers halves,
yes,
what's been going on with the Panthers, mate?
They're fine. I don't know what you're talking about. Look, the Panthers, from the very first game, the word that I kept on coming up was they looked complacent. They looked like everything was just going to work for them for some divine reason. And they're coming up against a lot of teams, and there's a lot of teams this year that are playing with grit and really playing hard. And the Panthers are just getting found out because of it. Cleary looks lost in the middle at the moment, and I don't know what the deal is with that, because he's a great player. There's no reason for him to be playing poorly. He's not carrying an injury. I don't think he has any pressure from the coach. He just looks like he looks lost. It's hard to explain. Maloney has been up and down this year. I mean, he had a really good game a couple of weeks ago, but the big thing is the missed tackles are outrageous. Like, the missed tackle numbers A first grade team should never miss as many tackles as the Panthers have been over the course of this year. And that just comes down to a desire, I think, and being found out by opposition forward packs. And the Panthers forward pack, I mean, you look at it, it's a pretty damn good forward pack on paper. But they're just getting beaten in the forwards. And, you know, people have said that they don't look fit, that they've got some fitness problems. I just think it's desire. Like, they're just not putting in that extra 10%. And in the NRL, that sees you getting beat and beaten pretty well. Against the Sharks, they got that 14-point lead, and it wasn't a super convincing 14-point lead. The Sharks weren't playing great, and the Panthers sort of, you know, they just got there, you know. And then the Sharks didn't even turn it on. They weren't playing out of their skin. And you could just see that they were going to beat the Panthers. And it was just terrible to watch as a Panthers fan. I don't know what the Panthers do because they're really locked in. They're locked in with the coach. They're locked in with the halfback. I mean, they're the two highest paid in their roles in the club's whole history. Maloney's an older player, so he might be somebody that you can move on. But then you're getting rid of the one playmaker that is doing anything this year. The forward pack is, I don't think you could gut the forward pack. Their worst forward, they made the captain this week. I just don't know where the Panthers go from here. It's like they've set up for this bright future. Everything's in place, everything's set in stone, and it's terrible. And that's really, really scary from the Panthers' point of view because they're locked into this and they have to get out of this problem themselves. And they can't look for any outside help at all. They can't look to, you know, get rid of a bunch of players that are off contract. They've got to sort this out themselves. And, you know, if they have a next few weeks that are poor, their season is completely over if it isn't already. And that's outrageous for a team that I think talent-wise alone is a top 4 team.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, mate. And to be honest, there's an awful lot about the Panthers this year that reminds me of the West Tigers in 2012, where that year the Tigers were being billed as, you know, this was their premiership window. This is the year they're going to get to the grand final. That was after, you know, 2 years in a row where they made the finals and were looking pretty good. And they ended the year in 9th or 10th place and just petered out. It was miserable. And I think Penrith is sort of in that sort of situation where people were talking about them as being premiership contenders this year and they're cruising too much. And now it's got to the point where they're not cruising anymore. They're stuck and they don't know how to get out of it. And one key feature that they had in the last few years was their ability to win games that were lost. And this year, they've got the ability of losing games that they've pretty much got wrapped up.
Yeah.
The other big problem they've got, and this was last year, it happened big time, and it's continuing this year, is discipline on the ball and off the ball, in attack and defence. They are the most ill-disciplined team in the competition last year, and it's happening again this year. And that's missed tackles, ineffective tackles, handling errors, just general play errors, penalties conceded. All these 1%ers that go against your team, they're the worst at getting them right. And, you know, they were doing it last year with two different coaches. They're doing it again now with a completely different coach all over again. I don't know if it's the coaching, but more what's between the ears of the players. And I don't know how you fix that because it's, as I said, I can't blame the coach because they were doing this last year.
Yeah, and
he wasn't there.
Yeah, and like last year we were having jokes with amongst Panthers fans that the game wasn't on until we were down 14-0, you know, and then we started playing good footy, and like it's all of those things that we're allowing to go against us and giving away penalties and all that sort of stuff, and we always had to overcome that as a club, and now it's like between doing that still and just not playing with the same desire as our opposition. Now we're just finding that we're not in games. We're not in with the shout of winning some of these games. I mean, we played the Gold Coast Titans into form. It's just been a terrible, terrible start to the season. And in a month from now, their finals aspirations could be completely over because they're going to lose some players to the representative calendar. And, they're probably going to get some players in the State of Origin team, whether they deserve to be there or not. And, this season's going to be over. It's a terrible way because as a Panthers fan, I come into this season thinking, look, the top couple of sides, they're probably beyond our reach. But on our day, get us into the semi-finals. And on our day, we might be able to do something. But no, they don't look like, they might be one of the most out-of-form teams in the league. And I look at somebody like the Canterbury Bulldogs, who I think have the least amount of talent in the NRL by quite some way. But they're playing their asses off. Like, even in the games they're getting smashed in, they're playing with so much desire the last few weeks. And if the Panthers played with even an ounce of that desire, they're a top 14. And they're not. They're just playing like rubbish, and they're getting the results they really, truly deserve.
No, I fully agree, mate. I mean, you've only got to look at the 2 wins as well. I mean, a very sloppy, scrappy win over the Tigers in Golden Point and a 2-point victory over the Newcastle, which was neither of those were convincing in any way.
No. And also, like the Knights, we're finding out the Knights are actually a pretty bad team. And there was a point in that Knights game that I was thinking, man, this is the sort of game that gets Nathan Brown fired. And it's a couple of weeks later and people are openly talking about that now. And the West Tigers game, I mean, that was a minor miracle at the end that we even tied that game up, let alone winning it. It was a game that was really, we stole. I mean, the Tigers were the better team for most of that game. And, every other game they've looked so bad. It's just very strange to see. The other thing you've got to look at too is that we were in the top 4 last year when Griffin was sacked. And they brought in a coach to the end of the season, and then they put all of their eggs into the Cleary basket, and it's not working already. And look, they're still paying out for Griffin. They cannot afford to sack Cleary. He's there for like the next at least 2 years before you can even think about paying his contract out. They're stuck with what they've got. And unless they can turn it around, this is what they're going to be for at least 2 seasons, if not longer.
Yeah, I'm curious about the whole sacking Griffin thing. Was it because he wasn't performing, or was it because of a personality clash with Phil Gould?
Well, look, I've heard all sorts of things. I've heard that he had a falling out with Phil Gould, which I don't really take all of that sort of rumour on board. I've heard that the players weren't real happy with him, which good. Like if you're in the top 4 and the players think that your tactics aren't great or that you're working them too hard, good. You're in the top 4. He's not your mate. He's the coach.
That's right, yeah.
So I didn't understand it at all. I mean, there were some fans that didn't like the style of play that we played under him, but we were in the top 4. If they were back to playing, 1-out hit-ups like Matthew Elliott used to when we're in the top 4, I wouldn't care. As long as we're in the top 4. And we weren't sneaking into the top 4 either last year. We were a legitimate top 4 side. And on our day, might have been able to do something once again. And when he got sacked, I mean, it was just bananas, the whole saga. But they got what they wanted, and this is what the result is. And I tell you what, there's going to be some jobs on the line in terms of the board and the CEO. If this is what we have for the next couple of years, they really need to turn it around this weekend and turn it around in an absolute massive way as well, because it's just not good enough what we've seen from the Panthers this year. It's disgusting.
I could give you a bit of perspective here, mate.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Elliott as coach won 44.1% of games at the Panthers.
Yeah.
Ivan Cleary is currently at 44.23%.
Wow.
Almost identical. And Elliott was coach for 111 games. Cleary's done 104, so there's only 7 games less.
So now let's be fair about this, right? Okay. So Matthew Elliott took over from John Lang, and John Lang left behind a team that still had the core of a premiership winning team that he left behind, right?
Yeah.
And the team that Ivan Cleary took over in his first stint with Penrith, the one that he got tired during, the team he took over was the team that Matthew Elliott left behind. Now, that was something
right.
very, very different. And to be very fair to Ivan Cleary, he helped rebuild that side with the help of Phil Gordon and working on the juniors and everything. He helped rebuild that side. He helped them get through some growing pains. But then he got tired, and then it was Griffin who was going to take us to the promised land until whatever the fuck happened then. I don't really know.
Well, how's about this for a bit more then? Okay.
Keep hurting me. Keep, bring it on. Just do it.
Anthony Griffin, second most successful coach that Penrith ever had behind Ron Willey as far as win percentage goes. He won 58.3%. Ron Willey had 66%. John Lang was 51.6%.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, John Lang took over a team that was a pretty poor side in terms of wins and losses, but one that was about to explode with a very rare, infusion of talent that you don't see too often in rugby league, where all of these young players just, like, it was overnight. I remember the game that it happened. It was like, oh yeah, we can actually go and smash some pretty good teams. And they actually did it to the Roosters early in that 2003 season. It's like they woke up to themselves. But towards the end of Lang's term there, it was just time for a change, I think. And I think that the Panthers needed a new voice. Unfortunately, that new voice was Matthew Elliott. So, not a real good voice. To get rid of Griffin with that sort of winning percentage, you can't get rid of a coach with a winning percentage that high at a club and not replace him with a super coach.
Especially with the squad that they had and the form they were in.
Yeah. If they had come into this season and they had got, say, 5th or 6th on the ladder, you would say, well, that's, what about that? That's interesting. Not as good as last year. But you look at where they're at now, and it's like it's been a disastrous move at the moment. You couldn't look at it as anything other than a potentially, a premiership destroying move to get rid of Griffin. And I know a lot of people didn't think he could take the Panthers to the next level. I just look at his record, that's all you can go by is his record as a coach. And I tell you what, you'd take 58% this year if you're a Panthers fan.
Bloody oath you would. So this is the thing, because of this, the squad's had little change. And obviously there's been a coaching change. But I wonder if the way they're performing is because of off-field stuff that's going on. Obviously they had the sex tapes crap. That's a distraction for a little while. I'm thinking that the talk that's been going about Phil Gould having a bit of a falling out with the club, whether that's hurting the club on the field and off the field as well.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I always think when you've got somebody around that there's talk that they're on their way out or they're looking elsewhere, and Gould is obviously the man at Penrith. He's a very big personality there, and he's somebody that has really looked to cultivate a culture at the club since he stepped in and really fixed up the mess that the club was in at the time. So for a lot of these players to have arrived during that time and to now see that he might be on his way out or being moved on by somebody higher up in the club, I mean, that would have an effect. I don't know that the sex tape stuff has as big an effect as many people think. I think that you'd probably be like, oh man, the teammate's stuffed. He's stuffed up. And like they got rid of Tyrone May, I believe it was. Excuse me. But I don't know. I just think that they've expected to be a top side this year, and it just has. We've seen a lot of teams that don't have the same amount of talent playing with a lot of desire, and I think that it's taken them by surprise. And for whatever reason, they haven't, had that shake up yet. They haven't woken up to the fact that they've got to rip and tear, otherwise they're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I brought up the Phil Gould thing is because he's been there so long and he was doing a lot of work with juniors and also with recruitment. I mean, most of that squad's there because of him. And
Yeah.
so for him to be talked about being on the outer or being pushed out of the club, um, that would have a negative impact on a lot of those players, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might be part of the reason for why they're performing the way they are, because they don't want him to go because he's the reason that they're there.
Yeah, and I don't think he should go. I think it would be really unfair to be pushing him out. I think he deserves to be stood by and to let him see this out in whatever way you do that, because he really did work hard to turn the club around and really change things for the better for the club. And I think Panthers fans are forever going to be grateful for that. But, there was talk that he had a handshake deal with Wayne Bennett and that the club didn't sign off on that and they wanted Cleary instead. And I can understand that. Like, I look at all of the clubs that Wayne Bennett has left behind his last few stops, and they've been in pretty poor positions when he's left.
Yeah.
So I can see where the club wouldn't have wanted that. But at the same time, whatever decision was made, it had to be one that was a home run. And right now it is far from a home run. So, hopefully they can turn it around. They really need to go on like about a 7-game win streak or something to really show that they're back. I just can't see that happening. Like, I kind of think that in a month from now they're going to be done.
Yeah, I think with Ivan Cleary, I don't see him. He doesn't come across to me as the sort of coach you hire to win a premiership. He comes across to me as the same sort of coach as a Brian Smith or a Tim Sheens. You bring him in to shake shit up and clean the place out and get us for someone else to come in and take that last step. Mm-hmm. And Penrith weren't in a situation like that when he got there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because you look at what Cleary's done at other clubs. When he was at Penrith the first time, when he went to the Warriors, when he went to the Tigers, and look what he did in his first 2 years at those clubs. Well, for the Tigers' first year. Phenomenal changeover. Like, he fixed up a whole heap of cultural issues, fixed up the squad, fixed up a lot of things in the back office, and made those clubs a hell of a lot better than what they were when he first turned up.
Mm.
But it's a completely different dynamic this time around. He's not doing that job this time. And I'm wondering if he's probably still trying to find his feet in that sort of area, because he's always had to work hard to get to the point where this team is that he's walked in on. And I think he may be one of those guys who likes to be able to build it from the ground up to a point where he wants it, whereas this time he was just walked into something that's successful.
Yeah, and like his first stint at Penrith, I was really critical of when they let him go, because I felt like he did all of the hard work, and just as it was about to bear fruit, they let him go. I thought it was gross. And it's hard to argue with his record. He does make a difference. And I do think he's a good coach. But when you've got a team with this much talent as Penrith has, and they're playing the way they are, the first thing you've got to look at is the coach and what he is doing. And, it's his job to get this. It's his job to have them performing at their optimum level, and they're just not. They're one of the worst clubs in the league right now. And, it must have been very strange to step back into the role that he left only a couple of years before, to be under the boss that let him go because he said he looked tired. And, I think the thing about coaching his son is not a real big issue at all. I don't think that would be too much. That would affect either of them too much.
Nah.
But it's just not working. And for all them big decisions and for it to be working this poorly, man, like, I'm glad I'm not the one that made those decisions.
Well, I must admit, when I first heard that they'd signed Cleary from the Tigers, I immediately thought that they were just protecting their investment in Nathan Cleary.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought this is the best way of doing it. And Ivan's not a bad coach. We've had him here before. Look what he did at the Tigers. Mm-hmm. So I think they've done that to protect what they've invested in Nathan. I don't know why they would have thought Nathan would leave. Because from everything I gathered, he looks like he's pretty happy where he was there. And he'd made no mention about leaving the club to join his father.
Yeah, he said he wanted to play under his dad at one point, but it wasn't like he was putting an ultimatum that we know of.
Yeah, it wasn't a demand. He wasn't saying, I need to do it now. He's just saying, yeah,
Yeah,
one day down the line it'll work out. And to be honest, all they had to do was wait probably another 18 months when Ivan's contract ended at the Tigers and they would have had it.
yeah,
And if they had
and
said that to Nathan at the outset, he probably would have went, yeah, fine, that's cool by me. But for some reason, they've rushed it through and, yeah.
the problem that they have now, and look, Cleary's a really good young halfback. I wouldn't take him. I wouldn't take any other young player in the game over him because he's a good young halfback. He's level-headed. He's, comes from a good footy family. There's never been any dramas there. I think he's the sort of young player you want to build a team around, and he's proven himself in a lot of circumstances very early on in his career. The problem that you have is that when you've invested so much in him and his father, is if you get to a point where you do have to let his father go, you're going to upset him. And it had to work really well or it was going to end really poorly. And I hope we're not seeing the start of it ending really poorly because, the Panthers will lose a really good young player if they do. Hopefully they can turn it around. But as I said, I don't think, when I look at them, I just don't see them turning it around. I can't see them flicking the switch and all of a sudden everything's cool and they're making less mistakes. They're not missing 50 tackles a game, and they've got that desire back. It just doesn't work like that in rugby league. I think that we're in for a pretty disappointing season as Panthers fans, and one of the things that I've always talked about as a Panthers fan, and one of the things that I was very happy about coming out of the Matthew Elliott soul-destroying debacle, is the fact that the Panthers, all I want is the Panthers to have a shot. It doesn't have to be a great shot. Just be in the race. I'd like to be able to turn on the TV on the weekend or go to a game on the weekend and say, we've at least got a shot at winning this one. And to think that this year we might be back to being also Rans again is rotten. It's not good at all.
They've got a pretty tough few weeks coming up too. They've got South this weekend, Canberra the week after in Wagga, and then they come back against the Tigers, and the Tigers have got to play the Titans, and then the Roosters the week after. So we could be seeing another bludger of a game in round 9 between these two sides.
We might,
and that'll be played at Suncorp.
We might be doing the wooden spoon battle podcast.
That game will be on Magic Weekend. Tigers Penrith.
Oh, beautiful! I bet they stick around to watch that one up in Brisbane. Yeah.
That'll be a magic vacuum.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's like, Jesus. If you look at the form, South should absolutely destroy them this week. They should absolutely put the cleaners through them. So it's going to be an interesting test to see. And if they get smashed in this game, I'm willing to just write the whole season off.
Well, yeah, if they get hammered by South at home, that road trip to Wagga against Canberra, that's going to feel like a Canberra home game. That's not going to go well for them down there.
Yeah, and the Raiders are playing all right too. I don't think that they're playing as well as a lot of people, but they're not the premiership contenders that I think some people believe they are. I need to see more for them against sides that are actually playing well themselves, but they're playing well enough to beat Penrith, that's for sure. If they were playing Penrith this week, you'd say the same thing. They could rack up a big scoreline against Penrith.
Yeah, it's one of those years and one of those days rounds, I should say, that we've both had that makes me very, very grateful about the fact that I'm a historian, because I can just go bury my head in some newspapers and something from 70 years ago and would read that instead.
Yeah. Let me tell you, God bless James Harden and the Houston Rockets. That's all I can say. Because if it wasn't for them, I would be very, very upset right now.
Yes, and I must say I'm very grateful for having a whole heap of stat stuff to look at from the 80s and a whole heap of book ideas I'm going through from before then as well. So,
nice.
Plenty of distractions out there.
Yeah, you need them when your team's going terribly. It's It sucks. I like to be able to I like to just be able to have my team in the running. But when they're not in the running and you're turning the TV on, and this happened to me through the Elliott era was a complete write-off, and I knew that before he even got to the club. But then before we got John Lang, and we just had a really, really poor team, and I started calling myself a Panthers survivor rather than a supporter. And there was some really bad teams that we had, but then every so often they'd be bringing a young player here and there, and you'd be like, oh, this young dude can play all right. Oh, this sort of guy's all right. And then all of a sudden it's just, it started clicking. But yeah, oh man, we could both be in for absolutely horrible seasons. It'll be good because we'll be able to focus on everyone else when we do our podcast. We won't have to talk about our own teams because they'll be completely irrelevant in a month's time.
That's very true, yes. Alrighty, well, that's been a stellar chat about the misery that we've had to go through this week.
Yeah, I'm depressed. That sucked.
Likewise. I'm going to go need to take some Valium.
I'm going to become an alcoholic.
I might start taking up alcoholism.
Yeah, well, if we do that, we'll have to repent, according to Israel Folau, so why not?
It's a good thing that you don't have to repent for swearing, or do you?
I don't think swearing was on his list, was it? No, swearing wasn't on his list.
That's fucking fantastic, because I'll tell you what, I was given an absolute hiding today.
Yeah, well, I only swear occasionally, so it's not too bad, I guess.
You ever have those moments when you're watching your team getting absolutely smacked, and you've got to that point where you still think your team's a relative chance of winning the game, and you're sitting there swearing about every stuff up they make, and then they get to that point where they're behind by so far, they're no chance of winning, and you stop being swearing and angry, and you start being swearing and laughing.
Yeah. Know what I do? I will be, like, when a player misses a tackle or something, I would be sitting there and I'll be like, fuck you. Just fuck you. Like, just getting right on the individual, I tell you one thing about swearing. I don't normally bet on sports, but I put some money on the basketball the other day. And I put a couple of bets on James Harden to score, I put a crazy bet on him to score 45 points, and he's the sort of player that could have done it. And there was another bet I put on him, to score 5 3-pointers in the game, which is very doable for him. He started the game 0 for 14, and is like one of the few, I think he was like one of 2 players in NBA history to start a playoff game 0 and 14. And he didn't start, I think he scored his first field goal in the third quarter. And this is a guy that has been scoring points crazy this year. And I was like, I cannot put any points on him because apparently I'm the best guard in NBA's history because I'm the only person that stopped James Harden all season. So I was swearing a lot during that game. But thankfully I'd put a lot of points, a lot of money on them to just win head to head. They were really good odds. So I won a good amount of money on the game. But even then I was swearing at every single thing. It was very frustrating. So I learned that I can't put any money on my Houston Rockets. I just got to enjoy their wins and allow James Harden to not be cursed with my money ever again.
Yeah. I don't bet on sport because I'm just shit at it.
Yeah.
I made one stunning tip one day and it was all fluke.
Yeah.
Bit of a story here. When I was in year 10 at school, for some reason we were allowed to go to Melbourne for our school excursion, which is massive for us because we're in the country. Seeing a place that's got more than 30 people, and it's pretty exciting. And part of the Melbourne journey we had was to go to the Melbourne Cup. So a bunch of 16-year-olds were taken to the place where there's betting and drinking and half-naked females everywhere and men for that case. And I went in there and I sent my mum a text message and I said, I can't remember which horse it was. I told her, I reckon you should put some money on this horse, so I think it'll win.
Yeah.
And she said, I know what you're like with tipping, you crap at it, so I'm not going to bother. And the friggin' thing got up. So that's it. I've blown my one good chance. I'm not bothering anymore.
That's the weirdest excursion I've ever heard of. They let you go to the Melbourne Cup.
Mate, that was such a bad decision on their behalf because there was only it's probably about 30 or 40 of us all up in that class.
Yeah.
But once the gates open, we were allowed in. There was only 2 or 3 teachers.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much saying, right, we've got to make sure we all stick to... Oh, they're gone. I mean, just sort of bolted everywhere. So I was with 4 or 5 of my mates and we went down to the track side and we followed these track officials to the inside of the track.
Oh my God.
And it was for track officials only. And we walked through behind them and the security guy says, what are you doing? We said, oh, they're our parents. And they went, oh, okay. So you could probably, if you go back to that year, I can't remember which one it is now, 90, might be 96 Melbourne Cup.
Yeah.
You might be able to get a glimpse of us on the inside rail just after the finishing post because that's where we were standing.
That's absolutely insane. Wow.
So we had a very long walk to get out of there. It took about an hour to get out of there from down there.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
That was insane.
That's nuts. I remember in my high school I think it was year 10, and in our science class, and we had one of those science teachers that weren't sure that they were a teacher at all, or that they got their certificate from some weird country. We'd convinced our science teacher, who we were studying something like kinetic energy or something, I think it was. We convinced them to take us on an excursion to Eastern Creek Raceway to watch the drag racing, right? And I don't know how, because it's insane to think about. And so the people that were interested in drag racing, and me and my friends used to go to see the drag races a lot, we were all keyed up for it, and everyone else was just sort of excited to be doing this thing that was insane. And we'd all gotten permission off of our parents to stay there after the school hours. So it was by 3 o'clock, we could just go wherever we wanted. And yeah, we spent a day at the drag races as a school excursion. And it was crazy. I can't even, how they let that happen. There was nothing to be learned that day. But it was great. And yeah, that was before they had the Western Sydney Dragway. That was back when they used to do the drag racing at the track, the Eastern Creek track. But yeah, this is insane. But nah, that wasn't Melbourne Cup. I mean, how did they justify allowing us to go where it's just all betting? That'd be in the newspapers these days.
Yeah, I don't know how they managed to pull that off. They probably lied.
Yeah.
That was, I always remember that. The only other memory I had of that was we were allowed to go to the cinema one night and we went and watched, I think, The Phantom with Billy Zane.
All right, yeah.
And I fell asleep.
I tell you what, that reminds me of something. When I was in primary school, and I think I was in about year 3, and we went on an excursion to see Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, that's a pretty full-on movie for a bunch of 9-year-olds to go and see. What the hell? It's they must have just thought it was a cartoon, like a normal cartoon. It's full on.
That's great. I'll tell you what this is a good little run down memory lane, this one. When I was in year 7, we went to a prison farm.
Oh my God, what the hell?
You had to stay there for 2 nights. It was just this little community with just little units and stuff. You had to cook your own food and stuff. You didn't leave the facilities.
Oh my goodness. Oh. Wow, we had a weird education, both of us.
Yeah, you don't get many options out in the country, so you've got to make do wherever you can. So we had a prison farm. Brilliant.
Fun, that's great. Oh boy.
Maybe that's where we could send the Tigers and the Panthers players to have a bit of a long hard look at themselves.
Yeah, just send them to a prison farm, do whatever they do there,
not much.
Yeah, just hang around.
Introduce yourself to one another again, because it looks like we've all forgotten who they play with these days.
Yeah, it really does with the way they're playing. Jeez.
And on that rather magnificent segue, I mean, come on. Doesn't get better than that.
That's gold. That's absolutely gold.
We'll wrap this one up here, and thanks everyone for listening. And if you need to get in touch with us or want to get in touch even better, you can send us an email to podcast@legfreak.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at League Freak or at Andrew RP. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, any other goddamn thing you can think of. We're on it. So tune in, share us around. If you're on iTunes, give us a subscription and a 5-star review. Mm-hmm. Don't give us crappy ones because we don't want them.
No.
And let's be honest, we don't deserve them.
No.
So till next episode, we'll catch you all later.